This project is going to be very different. My normal style is to prep a sketch first and then start laying paint on canvas, but I could not get something ready and it's been too long since I've done a painting. So this is going to be just painting. No reference, no nothing. I've thought of a few ideas and I just hadn't decided what I wanted to do, so this is gonna be what it shall be. I started off just laying down color I liked and just filling in some space. And the color I chose was a mix of red and yellow. An easy way to add charm to the color so it's not just flat, what you can do is not mix it completely and mix it with the brush. That way some of the color from like orange will be more like mixed of yellow and red. It's not a flat color, it's a bit of a mix. It keeps it from being really flat. What I'm doing here is I'm noticing that the top of it's bright, and I'm actually going to run with that. I'm keeping where centered on the canvas is getting darker or deeper with more reds. The top is going to be more of yellow, so I think at this point I decided it's going to be kind of a sky. With the small size of the brush, I was able to use a little bit more intent in what I did, and it gave me time to plan out or decide on the fly where I was actually going to change the colors. Because as I go to the right, I wanted to make sure it stayed consistent with the part on the left, with a little bit of variety, of course. Since I decided that that orangish color was going to be the sky, and whatever this is going to be, I had to figure out how I was going to make a gradient or a hard line, what I was going to do with the bottom half of it. Since even still, at this point, I'd only been using yellow and red to mix this orange, I decided I'd shake it up and add some blue. So that's the final bit of color that was left to put in there. And I didn't want to make it like just straight blue at the bottom, so I still kept using more of the yellow and red, just using less and less as I moved down. Using the same method that I was using for the sky, rubbing the brush the way I was, kind of doing a twisting motion in the wrist, it started to look like rock, almost like sand or dirt. And with the blue, it made a perfect mix and contrast, so I decided I'd actually just straight up make it into like a horizon line. I took a cue from Bob Ross in making the shadow and the light on that rock, the way he pulled from the farthest edge. Honestly, at this point, I liked the look of it so much I could have just left it that way, but I still wanted to add something. I felt like it was the lazy way out, so I wanted to add some look of decay, some trees decaying. The way I did it was kind of a shortcut, but I think it ends up pulling through and gets some like ridges and depth. But you do a straight line down with the edge of your brush and start pulling away from that paint, and it sort of adds a little bit of depth and some highlight in it naturally, and it feels more natural than adding highlights in post. I did a few more, and I noticed that the bottom half was still feeling a bit empty. So I was thinking over what I would put there. Instead, I'd start with at least putting a stump down there, to emphasize the feel of decay I wanted in there, like a dying world. A surprising benefit to how the paint was still wet all over was that I was able to use some of the paint in the background to work with the highlight, so it felt more natural and fit into the environment a bit better. Kind of like how when light reflects off water, you still see the water or the light of the water. The more and more I look back on this project, the more I actually am glad I did it, because every time I've done hands, I've done multiple sketches of it, but this time I decided to put a hand in there and I had no background to sketch, so I just had to freehand it. And I'm actually kind of proud of how it turned out, given I had zero reference I was working off of. This really emphasized the theme of decay and anxiety that I was working with. While I'm proud of how the hand turned out in the very end, the start of it very clearly didn't look as I was trying to make it. But that's the power of highlights and texturing, is you can make some, like, usually hands in particular don't come together as they're supposed to until you add more detail, until you add the shading, or if you're doing pencil, more detail to the fingers. Make sure you add depth to it. It's all that fun stuff. As you can see, I used the benefit of working with paint and the fact that you can just simply paint over. I redid the hand a few times because I didn't quite get the proportions right on the fingers, and I wasn't quite able to work back into making the hand smaller, so I just had to make it bigger. This is where knowledge of the veins and the bones in hands actually comes into play, into adding more detail, because I was using the ridges from the bones to add highlights, just to give it a little bit more texture. And even if you don't place them in their exact spot, it shows the part enough where people can understand, oh, well, I see, that's supposed to be the glint on that vein there, on that bone. I think that's enough. From there, I decided to add some more highlights to the trees and give it a little bit more of a depth to it rather than just leaving it so blank. Just for gits and shiggles, I decided to work on making a little sword, and getting the color for metal is difficult if you don't do it much, and I don't do it much. I usually draw stuff in black and white, and it's the first time I've ever put that into like a painting. So I made the gray using like blues and muted it with some red and orange, and then I added some white to lighten it, and then it became kind of like a cool blue, kind of like in comics, a cool blue. Then I raised it using more white. So for the highlights, I just added a little bit more white, or you can also add that color to the white once you need a lighter color. And I did the same trick with the trees in bringing down in a straight line and then pulling it away, because then I was able to, add a little bit of depth quickly, and then I can define it from there. To make the handle, I had to wipe off all that white from my brush, and then I can get to using the color I actually recycled from the land and from the darker hue. And that was after adding the cross guard, and then to the pommel I noticed that I just wiped off all the white I needed, so I had to go remake that color. Then as an added flourish, I did some of the white lightning I did for the pommel, for the cross guard, for the blade, and use that to add some detail to the handle, like for the wrap. And it wouldn't do well for the theme if I didn't also add some nice little friendly blood splatter to the blade to show that it's decaying too. You could also just see it as rust, but I just went with using similar color to what was used in the rest of it, try to pull it all together. It didn't seem right just having a clean cut at the bottom of the blade, so I added a little mound that it was sticking into, kind of like what I did for the hand. At that point, all that was left was the border, and that's a completed piece right there. That was perhaps the quickest one I've done, like, ever. It only took me about an hour to do this, and every other project took like 2 hours to 4 hours. Some of them even took 8 hours. But I'd say I'm pretty proud with the finished product. It's not the best thing I've ever done in my life, but I think it's good. All in all, this was a decent sized project, and it's something I never have tried before, and what I'm trying to do here is stuff I've never done before. So I think this is a good way to finish the video. Thank you for watching.